Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Rusty. Lee Lumpkin is going to offer our invocation for us.
Heavenly Father, thank you for uniting us today. Thank you for the great gift of life for each and every one of us. Thank you for the beautiful food before us. But most of all, thank you for the promise of hope. Amen.
Thank you, Lee. You may take your seats. And while everybody's taking their seats, I'm going to invite Josh Hart up here, a new member of our club, who's going to introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests. While he's on the way up, I just want to remind everybody about your cart bucket sitting on your tables. We've had we've got an update coming on our cart fundraising this year in just a few minutes, so don't forget your cart buckets.
Thank you, Stephen. Can all visiting guests please stand up now, and I think Beth will walk around and allow everyone's introduction.
I have Hunter Wilson of Hoffman. With me I have Jacob Blanchard, new hire for Hoffman. He hails from the great University of Clemson, and convinced him to come today. Thank you.
I'm Roger Stripp, and I'm happy to have as my guest today Charles Weber. Charles is one of our engineers up at the Railroad Museum, and he's also head of our maintenance department.
I'm John Nurse, excuse my hoarseness, but very pleased to have here as a guest of myself and also President Stephen Kishore Pakana. He is in the diamond business. He owns Green Diamonds. He's a transplant from Pittsburgh and a former Rotarian. We're delighted to have him with us.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome to the guests we have with us today. Please come back anytime you would like. We love having guests here with us. I'd like to invite past President John Bacus up to the podium to give you an update on our cart fundraising.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really did a great job. You did a great job. The last 2 weeks, we raised $1,126 from the contributions and gifts you all made, and added another $500 in match, so $1,626 during a 2-week period that we probably would normally take in about $140, $150. It's quite a tribute to Roger Ackerman and the work that CART is doing to find a cure for Alzheimer's. Thank you so much for that. It's really encouraging. But now, don't forget CART, just because that's over, please realize every dime goes to research, and we ask that you keep it up. I'm going to ask you one other thing, or just mention one other thing real quickly. We're going to have one of our little informal golf gatherings on Friday. So if some of you are not on our email list and would like to be on that list to be notified about events like that, if you'll catch me after the meeting, I'll be glad to include you on the notification list. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your leadership on that, you and Frank Brown as well. That was fantastic. And
Stephen, can we also add to that, as far as the CART fund? I told y'all, I think last week or whenever, or week before last, about the dinner in Sumter, South Carolina. They're going to close Main Street, and they've already sold out 100 tickets for $100 each. But after that, Rob Crosby from Nashville, who's a Sumter guy, he's coming with his band, and also the Footnotes, Johnny Hilton, who works very much with CART. Those tickets are $25 a person at the La Piazza, which is downtown Sumter. They haven't been in a long time. We're missing a treat. If you want to hear some two really good performing bands, that's going to happen this coming Saturday, I think about 7:30.
okay, that's right. The Inspire Festival in Sumter is coming up this weekend. We've actually been running some information about that in our newsletter the last few weeks. So if you're interested, check out Cynthia's newsletter, or our club newsletter that Cynthia does such a great job on. and you can learn more there about the Inspire Festival. Speaking of Cynthia and the newsletter, our club was recognized at the district conference for having the best social media, and we received a public image award. I looked at Cynthia; she's really done it all, and it's really a great tribute. She does fantastic work and spends a ton of time at Rotary and with Rotary every Monday and throughout the week. And I certainly, we'd be suffering this year without all your contributions. So thank you, Cynthia.
And I have the plaque, and I don't have it with me, and I'll follow it up.
That's fine, and we got a plaque. We'll bring it in soon. We're going to take a few minutes to do a table social, so get to know the folks at your table. If you're looking for a subject to discuss, you can talk about March Madness and your NCAA bracket, because I'm sure it's still in good standing. We'll reconvene in about 3 minutes.
Looking forward to getting back.
Okay, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. How many of you filled out, show of hands, how many of you filled out an NCAA bracket this year? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have one team in the Final Four? How many of you have two teams in the Final Four? I have two teams in the Final Four. How many of you have three teams in the Final Four? I have Virginia and Auburn. And I picked Duke too, they kind of let me down. But I was happy when Duke lost in a way, because my wife and children, we introduced them. We're doing a Creech family bracket this year. And we introduced the kids to the bracket concept, and I was in 4th place going into the weekend. And the kids are great, they're amazing, but they're all a bunch of Duke homers like their mom, so they all picked Duke to win it all. And so I had Duke in the Final Four, and I entered the same bracket with some buddies in another pool. And I said, you know, it would help me in the friend bracket if Duke wins. But if Duke loses, it wipes them out and I win the family bracket. So it was kind of a win-win for me. And we've got a large milkshake on the line. Everybody gets the regular size, but the winner gets a large. And so I'm paying for it anyway, so it really didn't matter. But a lot of pride in the Creech household, and they're all very competitive like their mother. So. I would now like to invite Wayne Cannon up to the podium. He's offering health and happiness for us today.
Everybody has to adjust this thing after him. He grew too tall. Everybody doing great today? Let me see what this thing says. There you go. It says, please read. Effective immediately after this meeting, I plan to resign as president of the Colombia Rotary Club. April Fool. Y'all got it. All right. I'm sure some of you were shocked. Anyway, I tried to look up the origin of April Fool Day. And there were 75 different versions. And so if you want to know, go on the internet and look it up yourself. Yeah, you really care. But the oldest one was from 1582, where in France they changed from one calendar, the Julian calendar, to the Gregorian calendar. And of course, they didn't have the internet in those days, and they couldn't notify everybody. And so some people were still celebrating all the different ones. So that's one origin. But there were a lot of different ones. If you're into that sort of stuff, you can. Like, it's interesting to see where we get this kind of things. Some information that will be of interest to you for the club. Ruth Ziegler had a stroke, and she's at Health South, and she cannot receive visitors at this time, but if you want to send a card, I'm sure that would be appropriate. Also, I talked with Ed Davis. His wife has been suffering from cancer, and they just got back from Houston, and she got a good report, and while she's not totally clear, she is in a stable condition, so that's good. I got good news, I think. My grandson, youngest grandson, got engaged this past weekend. He'll be graduating from Clemson next month, and he's majoring in biomedical engineering. I didn't even know what that was. It seemed like something to do. Okay, of course, I always share with you a county, and whether the county got its name, it kind of fascinates me. Marion County. Anybody here born or raised or lived in Marion County? His wife is from there. That's wonderful. Well, Marion County, of course, how many of you realize that when it was first named, it was Liberty County in 1785. And 2 years later, they changed it to Francis Marion, of course, after Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. And I don't know how many of you know how the Swamp Fox got his name. What happened was Tarleton, who was colonel under Cromwell, was awarded the job. It says, go out there and get that guy. He's bothering us too much. He's beating the crap out of us. Go get him. And don't come back till you kill him. Well, he chased him through the swamp for days and days and days. And finally, he just threw up his hands and said, I can't catch that fox. And so that's how he got the name the Swamp Fox. And it was an interesting thing, too. Another interesting fact, Colleton County. How many of you realize that Colleton County at one time was a part of Marion County? And when the railroad came through in the early 1900s, Marion did not want to have tracks coming through their county. And Colleton said, we'll take it. And so the guy's name who owned the railroad was named Colleton, and that's how we got Colleton County. I thought that was kind of fascinating. But, so they broke off, and that was happening in the 1800s. Of course, those are two. I think that the names of these counties are interesting. Okay, I always talk to you about the Rotary. And if anybody can tell me, the March issue had an article from the president-elect of Rotary International. Can anybody tell me his name? Well, I'll keep the book for another time. He ain't never going to let me get this book away. All right, y'all start reading the Rotarian, and somebody might win a great book. Actually, the book is pretty good if you want to get it. It's by Dr. J. Marcus Smith of Myrtle Beach. It's I Remember When, Myrtle Beach. It's a kind of a history of Myrtle Beach. And he was one of my mentors, and actually was instrumental in me going into optometry, to make a long story short. But if you happen to be down at Myrtle Beach, if you go by 38th Avenue North, there's actually a park named after him right there in Myrtle Beach. So when you go by, you see that look for his park on 38th Avenue North. Okay, the guy that's the president-elect happened to be a very nice picture of him in it. And his name is Mark Malloy, and he is from Illinois. And he's guess what? A lawyer. Only people can afford that job. Anyway, they asked him 3 questions. They asked him, the main question is, what do you want to do with your presidency? What you want your legacy to be? And I'm going to give you just a synopsis of what he said. He said, first, we want to redouble our efforts to support our clubs to attract new members and engage current members so that they will stay with Rotary to perform greater and more innovative service. Second and third priority is support the first one. At every level of this organization, we need to design our club meetings, service projects, and social events so they are family friendly. And number 4, I want to focus on Rotary's relationship with the United Nations. So that's, I hope that y'all ought to start reading your book, please. You're really missing a very, very vital part of your Rotarian experience by not reading. I keep one in the car. When I'm waiting on my wife, I'll whip it out and read. You know, I'd say that when she's shopping or whatever, heck, I don't want to do. Anyway, and the one this week, this month is, in the April edition, it talks about climate change. It's no longer warming, it's climate change. And there's some great articles in here about how we can deal with that issue, which is controversial in some ways, but otherwise, it's some great articles in there. And I got, let me tell you one joke. You know, Bob was in charge of health and happiness. Bob's a Methodist preacher. Bob was my preacher for a while. While he was coming through, and Bob, when he was first started out in his ministry, he was walking on the beach with the bishop. And as they were walking down the beach, this young lady came jogging toward him in a thong bathing suit. And the bishop grabs Bob's arm and says, "Don't look, you'll go blind." And Bob says, "I'll risk one eye."
Thank you, Wayne. Round of applause. The work you put into that and the reminder to always read the Rotarian magazine. I do read a couple articles in there every month. There are some really good articles in there. It's a page turner. So 2 quick announcements from me. April 15th, we will not be meeting. So mark that down, April the 15th. There are 5 Mondays this month. We're going to meet every Monday but April 15th. That's spring break week. It's also the Monday before Easter. So put that on your calendars, please. Next, who knows what this is? Bocce ball, that's right. We should all know what this is because on April the 27th, we're having our Bocce Bash in conjunction with the Special Olympics at the Fireflies Stadium, which is called Segra Park now. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you have not signed up yet, or if you have not signed somebody else up to play, we are in the last few weeks here. So we've already raised over $40,000. It's not so much about the money at this point, to be honest with you. I'm very happy with how that's going, but the participation is critical. So if you've given $100 and that's your contribution, that's great, but what I want is $100 and a name of someone who's going to show up that Saturday morning ready to play bocce and have a good time with the club. So please, if you haven't done that already, please consider that. This is our club's primary fundraiser. The Bocce Bash Committee is actually meeting immediately after today's meeting. We'll just meet right here at the front table. So we're less than a month away and looking for a real big push to the finish. So I'm excited about it and praying for good weather now at this point, now that it's April. So I would now like to invite Kathy Kennedy up. She's going to introduce our speaker today.
See if I can get this down on my level. Oh well. I'm Kathy Kennedy, and I'm here to introduce you to Colombia Green and to Regina Monteith. No, this is not Paula Gordon. Paula had a family emergency and she had to leave, but we are most pleased to have Regina here today. And I want to give you just a little bit of information about Colombia Green first before I introduce Regina. Colombia Green is not a part of the city of Columbia. It is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to seeing that Columbia is greener. And I don't mean more sustainable. I mean trees and plants and shrubs and flowers and things like that in Columbia. I first became informed about Columbia Green when I went to the Festival of Gardens. And if you see, there are two posters down here. The Festival of Gardens is held every year in May, and Regina's going to tell you a little more about that. And I would go each year and see what other people had done in their gardens and bring home some ideas for my own garden. And then there came a time when they asked me, would I have my garden on the tour? And I was most pleased and said, yeah, we've worked really hard. I'll be glad to have my garden on the tour. And that led to my becoming a member of the board. And Regina was a member of the board at that point. And I thought, what a ball of fire, enthusiasm, energy, and she was a master gardener. And so you knew that Regina could answer any question, or at least know where to tell you to find the answer. Well, Regina rotated off the board, and I became president, and we were looking for someone to serve on the Columbia Tree and Appearance Commission, and we thought, what better person to bring back and sit on the Columbia Tree and Appearance Commission in Columbia Green's seat than Regina. And she's been doing that for maybe 4 years now. So, and she's still doing it. So we are just so pleased to have her on that because she brings her expertise and her vision for the city of Columbia. Well, as a result of that, Regina was asked to be back on the board of Columbia Green where she sits today. And so she is here in lieu of Paula, and you are really in for a treat. Regina is not a native of South Carolina, and you will hear that when she talks, but she married a native Colombian, David Monteith, and he got tired of the snow up in New York and brought his bride with their 2 children back to Columbia. And I keep telling Regina she lives in what I knew as the Scoville house. It's right where Blossom Street comes into Kilburn, and she has a lovely garden that has not been on the tour, but maybe we need to impose upon her to do that. So I give you Regina Monteith, who is also not only a member of the Columbia Tree and Appearance Commission, not only a member of Columbia Green's board, but is also the incoming president of the Richland County Master Gardeners Association. So you can see she's very involved in gardening, and she's going to tell you a little more about Columbia Green.
My face must be bright red from all the kind things you had to say about me, Kathy. It's been my privilege to know Kathy through Columbia Green, and I've appreciated the friendship that we have developed. Her garden was fantastic on the tour, and the time and the energy that it takes to put into a wonderful garden is a measure of one's love for gardening. And Columbia Green is an organization that seeks to be sure that as many areas of Columbia as possible are green. Kathy started telling you a little bit about Columbia Green. It's a 501c3 organization that raises money to help beautify the metropolitan Columbia area through partnerships with other like-minded organizations and by providing grants to the community. We have helped with projects from outside Columbia, outside the Columbia city limits, from Lake Murray to West Columbia's airport corridor and into the city, from Northeast Columbia to Lower Richland. We believe that this effort will result in increased civic pride in our city, and it will spur economic growth as people who visit the city see what a beautiful place we have. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of Columbia Green. We were founded in 1984. We were patterned after a Philadelphia organization, and we began as a grassroots effort. with people getting together to beautify their own neighborhoods, particularly in the neighborhoods around 5 Points. Columbia Green provided plants, equipment, knowledge, and labor to groups while teaching them how to maintain gardens. We still have those neighborhood groups gathering together, working on what were our early projects. Just this past Saturday, in Paula's own neighborhood of Wales Gardens, the Neighborhood Association worked to weed and maintain the medians along Saluda Avenue. The rhododendron, the azaleas there are in full bloom, and they're absolutely magnificent. All the debris has been picked up, pine straw has been freshly laid, and the medians really are beautiful. It's worth a detour to drive up or down that street. So many of the Saturdays in the spring, neighborhoods devote to maintaining their common spaces. In the 1980s, we began to partner with the City of Columbia to plant green areas along the major arteries into Columbia. We give over $10,000 a year annually to the City of Columbia. We provide the funding for the plants, and the Department of Forestry and Beautification supplies the labor in what has become our most significant signature project. As you drive around Columbia, you can see the landscaping of the gateway medians. Coming into Columbia from I-277 down Bull Street, the medians on Elmwood Avenue and down Assembly Street, the medians along Rosewood and Beltline Boulevard surrounding Midlands Technical College, and along the medians to Fort Jackson. These are all funded by Columbia Green, planted and maintained by the City of Columbia. If you look closely at these medians, you'll see Columbia Green's green sign, indicating that this is one of our big projects. Next. Okay. We also provide educational events for our members and for the general public. We partner with many local like-minded organizations when promoting events, such as the Belsa Arboretum on Bloomwood Road, truly a gem in the Sherwood Forest neighborhood. We partner with the Clemson Extension Service, with Master Gardeners, who will be the guides at the Festival of Gardening later this year, the City of Columbia, and many businesses. This Saturday, April 6th, we will be having an educational event with Mill Creek Greenhouse on Leesburg Road. We have a speaker, an authority on native plants from North Carolina, who is coming to give a program on native plants between 12 and 2. The event is free and open to the public. Here's a flyer on it. If you want any more information, you can go to the Columbia Green website. The program on native plants will stress their importance to bees, butterflies, and other pollinators who will be active at this time of year. I'd like to invite every one of you to attend that event if at all possible. We'll have door prizes, refreshments, and it will be very exciting. I was just at Mill Creek last week buying some plants, and it's chock-a-block full of beautiful plants in bloom and not yet ready to bloom. Next. The most effective way that Columbia Green has to raise money is by inviting people to join our membership. On the table there are some brochures about Columbia Green with membership envelopes if you would be interested. We have several different membership levels, and each level has its own benefits. All members are invited to our special educational events, not for the public. This fall, we'll be having a special event in Lake City when we have a tour of Darla Moore's farm. We also have membership mixers and, of course, an annual meeting every year with a guest speaker. Last year, we were fortunate to have Evan Clements of Historic Columbia Foundation telling us about the history of the gardens on those wonderful properties that they manage. We also have a group of volunteers that we call thumbs, and they do the essential work of gardening, like weeding at public spaces, like the Laurie Center off Pickens Street, where Colombia Green has its monthly board meeting. This year, some of our members will be helping out with the crepe myrtles on I-277 that the Department of Transportation unfortunately thought that they would help to prune. Bit of a murder scene when they were finished. Our biggest and most famous fundraiser, however, is the fast approaching annual Festival of Gardens. And you see the posters on the front. This year, the Festival of Gardens is going to be in the Forest Lake neighborhood. This is one of the neighborhoods that was most severely damaged by the floods that we had in 2015. And we thought it would be a great opportunity this year to go to this area to show how the gardens there have come back and are now flourishing once again. I have tickets, $25 instead of $30 or $35, if anybody wants to purchase one after the meeting. These are some slides from past Festival of Gardening tours. We've had gardening tours in the Elmwood Park area, and that's Elmwood Park now. What a beautiful meditation garden there at the bottom of the slide. The Wales Garden area 3 years ago, when it was commemorating an anniversary of its neighborhood. What's interesting is that no two gardens are alike, and each person puts his or her own imprint on his or her garden. And so gardens are always a source of inspiration to us. In addition to our membership dues and the Festival of Gardening, we use these funds to fund our projects and grants and our tree initiatives. Every year we fund neighborhood projects that are submitted to us by interested parties in Columbia. This year we are funding a project at the Tree of Life Synagogue on Trenham Road. Some beds facing Trenham Road are in disrepair, and a garden plan to fill them with beautiful flowers that appeal to butterflies and bees, as well as some evergreen plantings will be done. We're also helping the Columbia Music Festival Association with the renovation of the front of their property. They're redoing their parking area, they're redoing the beds in front of their doorways, and along the area where they have their construction zone. So we are very excited about that. We are also helping the Supreme Court of the state of South Carolina in the refurbishment of its parking area. We're helping to beautify the area, which is going to be composed of permeable pavers in a way to address some of the stormwater issues that huge parking lots of asphalt generate. So we'll be planting trees along the side and along the front of the parking lot so that it's a beautiful scene not only for passers-by, but also for people who have offices in the high-rise buildings that surround the parking lot. So it's not just from street level, it's also from above, that people will be able to appreciate that lot. And then for the Belsa Arboretum, which suffered some extensive storm damage in recent years, we are supplying them with funds to buy upwards of 50 saplings of very many different varieties so they can grow them in their nursery areas and can augment the plantings of trees there. Does anybody have any questions about any of the work that Colombia Green does? Yes, sir.
If you land in an airplane in Portland and you drive out of the airport, you immediately see really lushly planted overpasses and the city of roses, roses everywhere. You think, this is beautiful, I'd like to live here. You land in Colombia and you see giant flying pig signs and it's hot and there are no trees. And I noticed in your opening comments you talk about the airport corridor, and I'm wondering if a group like Rotary said, I think we can make a difference here, how would we even begin to tackle something like that?
That's a challenging question. But I am sure that I can give you some suggestions. First of all, you could approach the forestry department directly and ask them if they have any projects on the back burner that need funding. A second thing you could do is approach Colombia Green directly and ask us if we would look into the possibility of greening more areas along the airport corridor. A third thing you could do would be to approach individual garden clubs that might have some relation to that area. But there are a number of steps that actually could be taken if one had an interest and funds. People are always happy to spend other people's money. But, for example, in this last year, the new director of forestry and beautification came to Colombia Green and said the area around Richland Memorial Hospital that Colombia Green funded years and years and years ago is looking quite shabby now. We have a new plan for it. Can you come up with the funds for it? And we looked at the plan, we looked at the photos of the present condition, and we said, yes, we'll do it. And right now, the area has already been planted with new plantings, some grasses, some knockout roses, and some yucca, yellow and green yucca. So what was once an eyesore is now, not overnight, but within 2 months, has become transformed through the City of Columbia and the Colombia Green Partnership. Even the most daunting task can be tackled if you have a will and you approach the new director of forestry in the city, Caleb King, has been on the job for less than a year, and he has made remarkable progress in driving around, assessing the city's spaces, and coming to Columbia and asking for funding, additional funding. And Colombia Green is always looking for projects to fund. Now, I mentioned that we have the neighborhood grants and the tree initiatives, but we also have a larger grant called the Founders Grant, and this is for projects that cost $5,000 and up. And this is a grant that was used to beautify the entryway of the addition to the State Museum that you saw in one of the slides. But we used it years ago to help with funding some of the gardens at the Robert Mills House and some of the gardens at the Siebel's House. So there is also an additional way to get more money from Colombia Green than the usual $3,000 grants. And if you wanted to look into that kind of grant, all you need to do is call Susie Thorpe, who is the president of Colombia Green at the moment, or call me because I am co-chair of the Projects and Grants Committee, and we can look into it. Projects that take more than $3,000, the ones that are $5,000, $10,000 and up, or that extend over a period of time, have to be approved through a more complex process than the neighborhood grants. But it's possible. Yes?
Regina, is there anything that can be done? I live like near the university downtown, and the SDNG, they just massacre the trees. Anything Columbia Green can do to protect our trees? They say they have to be balanced, and they're so unbalanced, and they come through, and I'm like a Russian housewife screaming out of my bathroom trying to protect the trees. I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done. They're from New Jersey, they don't care. It's really a difficult thing to save our trees from SDNG.
I'm sorry to say that there is absolutely nothing that Columbia Green can do. There is almost nothing that the City of Columbia Department of Forestry can do. The thing that a homeowner can do, and in most instances, the people who have the biggest complaints are homeowners who see their trees literally massacred, as you said. The only thing a homeowner can do is plant a tree that will not grow into the power lines. Plant a tree far enough away from the space that the power companies require. Plant a tree that does not grow as tall as the power lines, or not plant a tree at all. Plant shrubs that will grow tall, but not as tall as the power line. It's very discouraging, I know. But there's nothing we can do. The power company is like the railroad. It can do what it wants. And they're literally, we've had this conversation many, many times at Columbia Green, but there's nothing we can do. If the tree is there and it's in the way of a power line, it will be cut.
Well, it's frustrating because my house is 100 years old, so I didn't plant the tree.
I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, it's frustrating because my house is 100 years old. I didn't plant the tree, but I just tried to protect it. And then I drive it to Savannah and it has so many beautiful trees, and somehow they figured it out with their power line.
Well, here's the real solution. Underground utilities. Then you can plant whatever you want, and it can grow as tall as it wants. But you know, there is a movement in town for undergrounding utilities, and if you pass along Taylor Street in front of the University of South Carolina Law School, you'll see that there's a whole block there without power lines, and it looks so fresh and new. There's nothing obstructing the skyline. And a lot of the local projects in the vicinity of the stadium and extensions of roadways that have to do with the penny tax are undergrounding the utilities as the road work is being done, so that there is some hope that in the future we can get on this bandwagon to underground utilities. One of the former chairmen of the Tree and Appearance Commission has this as his personal agenda, to see if we can somehow use some of the franchise fee, just a fraction of it, 0.25%, into a fund that would ensure that utilities underground their lines as they go forward with construction. And I'm afraid that that is the best I can offer. It's not a good scene with trees that have already been planted that come in the way of utility lines. Yes?
You mentioned crepe myrtle.
Yes.
Can you tell us how we can prune crepe myrtles to avoid crepe myrtle?
Yes, very quickly. Don't cut them off like that. They're not meant to be cut off like that. Most crepe myrtles have either a vase shape or a flowing, drooping shape. You want to leave the tree in its natural form. You don't want to try to change its form. You also don't want to try to cut it down. What you need to do when you buy a crepe myrtle is assess the size of your space and then buy the tree that will fit into the space you have. Not try to cram a tree that will be too big or too wide into the space you have. When you prune crepe myrtles, you basically want 3 to 5 trunks. So start pruning the crepe myrtle 2 or 3 years after you have planted it. And you take the suckers that come out from the base of the tree and cut them off because they're not going to grow up into big sturdy branches. And then you look at the middle of the tree, and any branches that are growing inward or crossing other branches, those are the branches you cut out so that there's air in the middle of the tree. Any branches that are diseased, you cut out. But basically, you want a tree that looks like this or this. You don't want one that looks like this. And you see all over town those sticks now with those big knobs on them, and those are trees that have been murdered. Is that?
Thank you.
Yes.
My neighborhood has a bunch of those pear trees that smell awful. Was there a good replacement for those that are just as pretty but doesn't smell as bad?
This woman is talking about the Bradford pear trees, which were planted everywhere in the 60s because it was thought that they were sterile. And they would be pretty in the spring with white blossoms, and then they would just be there as a nice round tree and wouldn't do any harm. Well, wrong. Because since the 60s, some of the trees have become sterile, unsterile, fertile, and the trees also have a very weak branch structure, so they crack and they break, shedding limbs. So, and they also grow enormous thorns. There is hardly anything positive that can be said about the Bradford trees nowadays. And I understand that there's some place in North Carolina that's now putting a bounty on Bradford pears. If you cut one down, they give you another kind of tree. The thing to do is to take them out, and then what to look for? Look for a native tree. A native tree supports so much wildlife. They support insects. The insects support birds. The insects also support things like caterpillars, and they feed them. A Cali pear, Bradford pear, doesn't support any kind of wildlife. So a native tree that will bloom in the spring or later in the summer, that won't grow too tall, because if you have a Bradford pear, you didn't want something that would be a tall canopy tree, but something like a dogwood or a redbud. Those are things that come immediately to mind. But there is a host of native trees that can be planted in its stead.
And come to Colombia Green's event this Saturday and find out about it.
Yes. In addition to the small plants, they'll be talking about the big native trees that you can plant instead of the Bradford pear. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you recommend any particular variety of weed and feed or anything to put out on the lawn this time of year? So I know some gardeners recommend that you just not use weed and feed at all. But I need to put something out because my lawn is being taken over by weeds. Okay,
here's what I suggest you do. Go to the Clemson Extension Service, HGIC, and they have fact sheets on every kind of lawn that Colombians have, and they will give you all the information. I can't recommend anything, but the fact sheets have all the information. Thank you very much for your time.
Regina, thank you so much for all you do with Colombia Green to keep our community beautiful. And we can really hear the passion in your voice. And let's all go murder some Bradford pear trees when we leave.
If anybody wants tickets.
Yeah, Regina will be up here afterwards. She has tickets for sale. Next week, our speaker is John Fellows, who is the planning administrator for the city of Columbia. President-elect Louisa could not be here today. She's been having some trouble with her eyes, so she's missed the last few meetings, but she's starting to turn the corner and should be back next week. So please stand and we'll close in song.